Hi, thanks for joining me for the class on internet calling. Today we're going to be learning about internet-based alternatives to traditional phone calls. You might think of this as being similar to the cutting the cord class or cutting the cord information you've looked into with the idea of eliminating cable companies and finding alternatives to television and other viewing, except we're doing this now for phone services. So we're going to look at ways to save money and time and give yourself a wider choice by using online-based phone systems, although we are going to talk about the negatives that come along with that too. Before we begin, I want to show you where to find the handout that I'll be referring to throughout this class. If you go to the library's website at mybpl.org and go to Services, then Computers, and then select Computer Classes, you'll see a list of the classes that we have put online materials for here. If I click on Internet Calling, it'll open up the outline. Or if you like, you can choose to download that to your computer. It's a PDF made just for that. So you can have that handy if you like. It's not required for this or for any class, but I will say because of the limitations of this format, there are some things that I'm going to be showing you on the video, the outline that I have written here. I'll be demonstrating whenever possible how to do this through the browser and showing you on the screen, but we won't actually be able to place calls with people, and because this is not an Apple device, I won't be able to demonstrate FaceTime to you in a live format. And so for that reason, I will sometimes bring up the outline and show you images on the screen while we discuss what we would do. So with that, I'm ready to begin. Let's talk about Google Hangouts. Here we are looking at the inside of a Gmail account, what you would see when you sign in. Now, this is one that's created for the library and has limited use, so you're going to see in just a moment that we don't have very many contacts here, but it will work for the demonstration that we're going to go through. I noted in the handout that an alternative to Google Hangouts that many people might be interested in using is Facebook Messenger. That's another example of using an existing account and the contacts that are built into it as a means of communication. What you need for this is simply an internet connection, whether you're doing this over a desktop computer or whether you're doing it with a cell phone or a tablet. Any way it works as long as you're connected to the internet. Of course, if you're on a desktop computer, then you would need to have things like a microphone and if you wanted a camera as well. I'm speaking into a microphone right now, so when I demonstrate this, you're going to be able to see this working where it will use the microphone by default, or it will sometimes, first time through, ask you for permission to use the microphone. With that in place, let's take a look at the screen. Here's our standard Gmail screen. We would see incoming messages here. If, by the way, you look in the handout for this, you'll notice that I have blacked out the email addresses that you would see in some places here. That is just a matter of privacy and to reduce spam, but in real life, of course, you would see the addresses down here and in the contacts. In the Hangout section, which you can see I've highlighted in the handout, you would have your name right at the top, and if you wanted to contact somebody new, you would click the plus symbol there, and you would enter in either their name, email, or phone. If they're not in your contacts, then the name would not work, but email or phone number ought to connect to them if they have an existing Google account. Now, when you have sent this invitation, the person on the other end would receive it, and you will see a message as I have displayed in the handout here. Let me put in a account. You'll see a message saying that an invitation was sent. If I were to type this in and click send invite, then it would go to them. I'm not going to do that because I don't know who this account is. I just made it up for this example. But if you're typing in somebody's name, you would click send invite, and then they would be contacted with that. I'm now going to delete this option from the list here, clicking on the ... next to it. So if you actually want to contact someone, you can do that clicking on the name. And on the right-hand side here, you see you have the option of creating a group if you wanted this to be a group call, or you can click the video call to begin that. You can also just send a message directly if you simply wanted to text. You can work that way. When I click the video call, you're going to start to hear a ringing both from the computer and from the phone that I am calling up in the background here. Now you can see me and hear me echoing. That was, of course, a strange experience because I was calling myself within one phone. But what we did there is we initiated the call from the computer, and it created a video call with the cell phone that I have this account connected to. If we had multiple phones connecting to each other, you could work that in the same way through there. So in that way, using the built-in contacts here, and again, if you don't use Google, but you do use Facebook, there's an option there. There are plenty of other services online where you can do this as well, but those are two very common places where you already have accounts. In those ways, you can use these things that you already have as contact tools. Of course, the requirement still is that you need to have an internet connection. If you are doing this on a cell phone or a tablet that has a data connection, that works as well. So you don't have to be in Wi-Fi. However, similar to what I will say with FaceTime in the handout, you do want to make sure that you have a strong internet connection. So whether it is a good cell phone service or a strong Wi-Fi connection, either way works. So those are quick ways that you can contact people using accounts that you already have. Now let's take a look at tools like FaceTime for video calls that would be built into phones or tablets. So here you can see we are looking at the handout for our discussion of FaceTime. As I mentioned at the start of the class, this is one of those situations where we don't have the equipment available that we can do a FaceTime demonstration as part of the video here because we don't have this connected to Apple devices, which is what FaceTime works on. But I do want to go over this because it's a very popular application and it's very commonly used. I will mention here, although it's not as common yet, the alternative Google Duo works very well with Android devices if you are, like me, not an iPhone user, but you want to use something similar to this. So let's talk about FaceTime and go over the requirements for it, why you might use it, and how it works. First off, here at the top, I have listed the requirements that Apple offers for using FaceTime. Now, if you look at this, you'll notice right away that if you have a working tablet or iPhone, then you meet the requirements. These are all very old devices that they're listing as the minimum basic requirements, so we don't need to worry too much about that. Now, the first thing that I have listed here is using this on an iPhone. And I show that this can be used as part of the phone application. So this can be something that's built right in, and you notice where the big hand is pointing that instead of pressing the phone icon, you press the video icon and it will contact people that way. Those of you that are iPhone users, you may have noticed in the past that when you are in a phone call, you will see the Go to FaceTime option appear if it is with another iPhone user as well. So you can click on that and pull this up. I mentioned this in an earlier part of the class today, but I again want to stress that if you're using FaceTime, you need to have a stronger connection than you do for a simple phone call. Very often you can make a phone call with a mediocre to poor connection as long as you have something there. But FaceTime is somewhat data dependent, and so you're going to need to have either a strong cellular connection or to be in pretty strong Wi-Fi. In the past, when I used to use an iPhone when I was traveling and wanted to make calls with this and do FaceTime calls with family or to check in, I would make sure that I was in a location that had very good Wi-Fi. So I'd stop off at a local library or something like that rather than just be out in the wild and trying to make a phone call and hope that that will go through. So keep an eye on that. Now, I list here going through finding the contacts, find the friend that you'd like to use and like to call using FaceTime, and wait for them to answer and simply talk to them using FaceTime. I do mention things like switching the camera angle, so you can change it to front-facing or away-facing. They actually call the what you might think of as the selfie camera on iPhones the FaceTime camera because that's what's its intended primary use. I also list here using FaceTime in an iPad, iPad Touch, or Mac. So you notice that if you have microphone and camera built in or purchased as additional accessories, you can in fact use this on a MacBook. You don't have to have a mobile device, but the primary use for FaceTime has always been working with tablets or with phones. So you can go to the Facebook icon on the home page or the icon on the tablet. Again, find the contact that you'd like to use using FaceTime and wait for them to answer. And finally, again, you would talk to them. A couple of things that I mentioned here works better when both parties have reliable wireless connection. We talked about that already. It's helpful to stand your iPhone up against something if you want to sit and video chat with somebody so you don't have to keep holding it. That's just a personal experience one for you if you're going to be using this for a while. That goes, of course, for Google Duo as well, as does the reliable wireless connection. Using FaceTime over cellular data rather than Wi-Fi can incur large data uses. So if, again, you don't have an unlimited connection, if you pay per data use, this is doing live streaming video, and that can rack up the data use pretty quickly. So you can use this over your cellular plan, but whenever possible, you want to do this over Wi-Fi. And finally, I mentioned that if you are somebody that uses Siri, you can make the phone calls using Siri by holding the home button down for 2 seconds, or by activating Siri by voice if you don't have a home button on a newer phone, and then say FaceTime video and the contact name, and that will invite the other party to the FaceTime video, same as going through the contacts. So this isn't an iPhone class. I don't want to delve into that too deeply, but Siri has a lot of shortcuts available for this sort of thing, and I'd recommend giving that a try if you use this frequently. So that was a quick discussion of FaceTime. Again, sorry about the technical limitations with that, but I hope that that works as a reminder for you. The things that I want to focus on is that you may be aware of this as something that you can do as part of your cellular plan, but this is something that you can use for a phone that you are no longer paying for a plan. So say you upgrade your phone and you have an older one and there's a family member in the home that you don't want to be paying for a phone plan yet, you can have them use this to contact you when they're in the home or other Wi-Fi areas. So this can be a limited use that you can control what they can do with the phone, and you can use this as one of the means of contact, similar to the Google Hangouts and other options that we talked about before. Finally, I'd like to talk about what I've described here as internet phones. Now, there are two different kinds of solutions we're going to talk about here. First, software, and then hardware. At the top, I have listed 4 kinds of software solutions. We've already talked about 2 of them, but I'm going to run through this real quickly. PC to phone programs are ones that can make a free call from your computer to a real telephone number so you don't need to telephone yourself. App to phone software are ones that make free internet calls from a mobile device to a real number. These services support making phone calls to any number, even landlines and mobile phones that aren't using the app. PC to PC internet calling is when a computer makes a free phone call to another computer. Google Chat I have listed there. The Google Hangouts is a similar example. Skype, if you've ever used that. And then app-to-app services running entirely on mobile devices and result in phone calls that can work only if the recipient has the same application installed. That would be the Google Duo or FaceTime that we've talked about. There are a lot of different services out there that provide the kind of app-to-phone software that we're going to focus on right now. I created a link here so that you can check out some lists that I have available here of popular options for how to make free phone calls on the net. So if you want to take a look at other options other than what we discussed in class today, we're going to talk about Google Voice. So I'm going to go back to the PDF here. But before we get into Google Voice, I want to talk briefly about the hardware solution. So I mentioned just a moment ago that we have software and hardware solutions. We'll come back to Google Voice in just a moment, but I do want to talk about this. There are services out there where you can purchase a device that you then connect to your internet. I've listed 2 of them here. There are more than 2 available. I have a little comparison right here, Ooma versus Magic Jack. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But what you are doing is you are purchasing a phone that is designed to connect directly to your internet. This is what's referred to as VoIP or Voice over IP. And the 2 most popular services that are out there are the Ooma and the Magic Jack phones. Now, I've personally used the Magic Jack phones. We've also used a higher-end VoIP system here at the library, and a lot of businesses use that as well. But I just want to talk about how this works and why you might consider it. So all of the options that we've talked about before are free ways that you can connect to the internet and connect to other people. I apologize, I misspoke there. That you can connect to other people on the internet and make phone calls or video calls or connect to them bypassing normal phone systems. This is something if you wanted to have essentially a landline without paying landline prices. Now, landlines these days aren't terribly expensive, so the savings aren't going to be enormous. Most of the time, you might get one as part of your cable package if you are paying AT&T or Comcast or anyone for home internet service. You're probably paying somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 for a landline that comes with it if you are still paying for that. So that comes out to $120 or so a year. Again, not prohibitive, but it's not nothing. These services are considerably cheaper, and they give you more features and versatility than a basic landline would. So Ooma and MagicJack are two different systems where you would buy a device, and as you can see in the diagram here, you plug it into your internet modem in your home, and then the phone is connected to the MagicJack device. There are a lot of phones that go with it, a lot of options that are out there. One nice thing that there are some phone systems, I've used one of these myself, where you can get a pair of these phones and only one of them needs to be near the internet modem. The other one can simply be plugged into power throughout the whole home, and it relays the internet connection through the power cables. So you can have one phone near your internet hub and then the other one wherever is convenient for you in your home. Now, why would you do this? We've been talking about free services this whole time. Why would you consider doing this? Well, sometimes you want to have a basic thing available physically in your home. If you're worried about older cell phones running out of power or having issues with them, if you, as was my situation, have a child in the home and you want to have a 911 option available that they could learn to use, and that other guests in your home, whether it's babysitters or visitors, could be used in an emergency situation, this can be a nice way to do that as well. So it's something that we made the decision that we would pay a little bit of money every year to have that added bit of security and have that available. It's not necessary, but it is an available option for you. I can tell you that if you look at the comparisons, things like the Ooma versus MagicJack comparison I have there, they will tell you that there are more services available with the Ooma, some more features out there, but the MagicJack does come in a little bit cheaper. And I can say firsthand that depending on other things that you want to pay for, extras like having your home registered via 911 so that it recognizes your address when you go to call, you pay somewhere between $30 and $50 a year for MagicJack, which ends up being a little bit less than half the price of a standard home line. Another nice thing with it is that, similar to a cell phone, if you do tend to use this MagicJack line a lot at home, you can access it anywhere. So you can go through their website and access their voicemail, and you can take it with you if you move to a new location. Now, I don't mean to make this a commercial for MagicJack. There are other services out there that work the same way. Again, Ooma is one that a lot of people are happy with and you might consider. I can just say firsthand, I have used this. And if you're looking for a little bit beyond what we've talked about in the class earlier today, you might consider these as options. One downside that I will mention is that if your internet service goes out or the power goes out, the phone will not work. Those of you who have had phone lines for a long time might remember that the copper lines going into our homes always worked independent of the power grid. And so if your power went out, your phone would still work. That's no longer the case if you have anything going through the internet service, because of course your internet hub plugs into the power, and if your power goes out, then you are out of luck. So just something to be aware of. So those are the hardware options that are out there. A little bit of a sidebar there, but I wanted to make sure that you're aware of them. Now let's talk about how the app to phone software works using the example of Google Voice. So if you were to get an internet phone number, you would create this account. You would go to Voice Setup. I have these steps listed here, how you would go about creating a number. You would go to Google Voice. After you have signed into your Google account, you would then continue here. Now, I don't want to create an extraneous Google Voice number. It takes a little bit to delete those over time, and I don't want to create that sort of internet clutter. But you would browse the available area codes. Google will prompt you to enter an area code so that you can get one that is in your area roughly. And you would choose available Google Voice numbers. Once you verify that, you can select it. Now, why would you do this? Why would you go about creating one of these internet phone numbers? You could use this, again, if you have a phone that you want to just be able to use in the home, say an older cell phone, and you wanted a relative to be able to call you if they needed to, or you just wanted to have an alternative way of making phone calls inside your home for more than one person that's there. You can add that to an older device. You can also add this to an existing phone that has its own phone number working just fine. Now, you might want to do that for a couple reasons that I have listed here. One of them is simply to save money. If you work with any kind of phone service that charges by use, so as your minutes go up, you pay more per month. A lot of them, a lot of the cheaper phone services like Ting or Consumer Cellular, you can pay for every increment of 50 or 200 minutes that you use per month, and that can add up pretty quickly. So if you use one of these Google Voice numbers or any other system out there, by the way, we've used another one here at the library called Talkathon that we found to be a useful service as well. If you use any of those, then when you are making calls on that, as long as you are in Wi-Fi, you are not using data or your phone minutes. So that can save you a lot of minutes there. In fact, depending on how your service plan and your pricing works out, it might even be cheaper to use your cellular data to make one of these calls than it is to use your minutes, depending, again, on how the pricing system works with your particular phone line. Because a phone call, a non-video phone call over data, doesn't use a real heavy amount of data there. I can say firsthand, I have used some pay-as-you-go cellular plans, and the minutes can rack up, particularly if anybody that's listening to this is in a household with somebody else that they share a phone service account with. My wife and I both were on the same service plan. And so if we were talking to each other, every minute counted as 2 minutes. And so you can get over that hour limit pretty quickly over the course of a month, and it can add up fast. So in that way, adding a second phone number to your phone can be a money saver. The second one that I have listed here is the privacy option. So if you have a small business or a side business or just any place where you want to list a phone number for people to reach you, but you don't want to make your personal phone number that you use in normal everyday life available to the public, you might consider this. I've talked about this with people that worked as real estate agents or that did a lot of selling of things online, whether it's through eBay or Craigslist, and they wanted to have a contact number that was available, or that just worked as consultants or had a part-time job and wanted to have a number available for that, but wanted to keep it separate from their normal phone number. This can be a great option. Now, you might say, well, why is it better to have people know this phone number than your other one? Well, your normal phone number that you use with your cell phone plan is something of a pain to change, and you're giving it to other people and contacting them with it. And so changing that can be a bit of a hassle. If you are somebody that is listing things on Craigslist or anywhere else online to be sold, and you just have to list a phone number that goes with it, if somebody starts harassing you over that number, or you start receiving an enormous amount of spam calls or something else that's problematic, you can simply get rid of that number and create a new one. It's not simple, but it takes a lot less effort than getting rid of your main number. So that's something that I would definitely consider. Finally, we already talked about if you wanted to have a in-home or in-the-office phone, this can be an alternative to that. I can again give you a personal experience with this. Here at the library, we have an internal phone that we use for contacting staff if we need somebody to come and assist someone else with computers. And for years, we tried to have a walkaway phone in the library, but because of the stacks and simply the size of the building, the signal was always getting blocked. We created a phone in building that has one of these disposable numbers on it. And we simply now call that number, and that reaches people wherever they are in the building, because as long as they're in Wi-Fi, it's able to connect to them. So we found that to be a good solution in here. So if you have a workspace where you want to be able to get a hold of somebody, you can go online and buy a cheap smartphone for $100, $200 and not have to get any kind of a plan with it. Just put one of these numbers on it and you can reach them wherever they are in the office. So that can be a nice technical solution to a problem with phone systems. So if you were to do this, you would, after creating your account on Google Voice, you would go to the App Store and you would install this app on whichever device you want to use this on. So you would install it on the phone that you wanted to be able to use this, or the tablet. And then that number would be able to not only receive calls within the building, but it would be able to call, as long as you're in Wi-Fi, any number at all. So that phone that I mentioned earlier that we use for calling up our employees, they can also use that to call customer support while they're standing next to a device that needs help. Anything that you could do with a normal phone, as long as you're in Wi-Fi or on a data plan, you can do with Google Voice or whichever similar service you use that is available. And if you're looking for similar services, there are a lot of them, as I said, online. And I have some listed here: Google Voice, WhatsApp, Text Now, etc. And you can see advantages or disadvantages for all of these. So that was our discussion today on internet calling. I hope you find that helpful. I appreciate any feedback that you might have on this or any of the classes. We're trying our best to adapt to the new format and dealing with these difficult times. So if there's anything that you'd like us to offer, I'm eager to hear it, and we'll do our best to offer it. We apologize that we can't have in-person classes. We'd love to see you here again soon. I hope that we're able to start soon and get you back in the building. But until that time, Hope to keep seeing you here on YouTube, and thank you again for attending. Have a great day.